This is a session from the participants pack for Anchor. This is session 3, and we can see the content of our session. We have a title and a subtitle, and we have a little introduction to each session. Then we have a little prayer to be said together by the whole group at the beginning of the meeting. And then we start our first activity prayerfully by reading the scripture while looking at the picture. This is the same for every Anchor session. The catechist, the leader, will then ask questions to the participants about the picture and the scripture, which will lead the participants into the content of the session. Opening in the inside, we find our first part is professing the faith. And drawing from the findings taken from the group, from looking at the picture and reading the scripture, we have the truth of the faith that were contained in there are explained, written down, and so that we read slowly the first part together. The second part of the session is celebrating the Mass and is opposite to professing the faith. It matches it. All the parts on celebrating the Mass match the parts on professing the faith. So, for example, here we have the history of salvation, and here we have the liturgy of the Word, explaining the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament. In the part on celebrating the Mass, we also have an activity which has to do with the Mass. So helping the participants to reflect on the Mass and enter more deeply into the meaning of the celebration of this sacrament. Once this part is over, so we read slowly through the text and do the activity. At the end of it, we move into our third part, which is living the faith, and is across both pages. Because we can only live the faith once we have received the faith. And we receive the faith because it is transmitted through us, the truth coming from God, and it is transmitted to us through the sacraments, the faith we receive by grace at baptism, and which grows in us through receiving the sacraments of the Church. And so we are able to live the faith in our life. So this part is more reflecting on our moral life. Again, we have an activity and a text to be read slowly. At the end of these 3 parts, once they have been read through and done, we then move into a church or a prayer area, a prayerful place, where each participant take their leaflet and read through prayerfully in silence in front of the Lord these scripture passage and little reflection which will help them to enter into prayer. We suggest participants spend at least 10 minutes in silent prayer, reflecting on what has been said and meeting with the Lord in prayer. Finally, the group finishes together by praying together the Our Father and the last prayer, and that concludes the Anchor session. To be done at home, we have a part called Anchoring Your Family in the Faith, with suggestions for parents who may want to live in their home what has been learned during the session, and so practical suggestion of how to make this happen at home. The suggestion tried to recapture the 4 dimensions of the Christian life that we have just seen: professing the faith, celebrating the Mass, living the faith, and praying with the Church. And finally, we have references from the scripture and from the compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church for future reading, for references, for those who wish to deepen their understanding of the faith.